Will, if you could just kind of give an overview of the themes behind the book and what the book's about and what it's trying to say.
Okay, so it's quite tricky being here because me and Tom Nixon, who's literally just got off the boat back from 16 months of travel, the Red Roaster was pretty much our sort of office to begin with, because we were based in the old Steam, just like 3 buildings that way. I think you're there now, or you were for a while. And yes, it's weird because he's back and we're here, and there are lots of sort of memories of, I don't know, meetings and conversations and stuff happening here. But the reason for saying that is that when Tom and I started Nixon McInnes, there were 2 books that inspired the whole company really, which was nothing. You know, the company was nothing, it was just an idea. But the inspiration behind it was the Clue Train Manifesto, which some of you will know is an incredibly kind of far-seeing book about how the web changes everything. And that was kind of Tom's gift to me. And then coming from my directions, Tom was a book called Maverick, which again some of you may have read, by a Brazilian entrepreneur called Ricardo Semler, who inherited his dad's company, which made like hydraulic pumps or something. It's an amazing book, and you know, read the book. There's 2 of them, they're brilliant. And that book was about how that man's journey of trying to run a business in a kind of 20th century way, command and control. He had a nervous breakdown. He was a Harvard business kind of MBA type. And he thought, screw it, I'm going to do it completely differently. I'm going to run this company democratically, radically, openly. And there's loads of great stories in there, but one anecdote to give you an example of how far they pushed it. In Brazil, which had a very volatile economy through the 70s, 80s and 90s, was that an engineer hired a helicopter to take a client on a fly past of a building without any authorization, without any permission from anyone. You know, a lowly engineer was able to hire a helicopter and fly off in it. And so those kind of 2 books inspired Nixon McInnes, and I'm kind of losing track of what the question was, but I think what I'm trying to say...
What's the book about?
What the book is about... What the book is about is like, okay, so that is the power of books for us. So what have we learned along the way? What do I know now? Like, what would be the book I would have liked to have read then that would have taken me from, you know, kind of mad Brazilian millionaire nutcase to like a field guide, a practical how-to. And also because personally I feel passionately and angrily that huge change is happening in business, like massive, motherfucking huge, once-in-a-lifetime change. And yet, you don't see that in the FT, or you see the glimmers of it. You don't see that in the business school curriculum. You don't, you know, when you go to the average accountant, the average solicitor, when you sit in the average university on a course, you don't hear this stuff. And so for me, I wanted to tell the stories of what I feel is a movement of businesses doing things differently. So that's what the book's about.
I mean, one of the interesting, I think, themes about the book is that in the past, it's often been argued that you can either have a good business or a successful business.
Right.
And what you're arguing, I think, in this book is that actually more and more, these 3 tenets that you talk about, democracy, openness, and I can't remember something else. Change. Democracy, openness and change are important in creating a good business, a successful business.
Yeah, I think, to take your words, I think what I'm trying to argue, and I'm on my own journey and we are as a company, so you know, who knows what the answer is, but what I think I'm trying to put out there is the idea that only good business is successful business in the long run. With the challenges we've got, with the opportunities we've got, I think it's written all over the place, like it's not sustainable, like successful business is bullshit. If that means pillaging the resources that it uses, hiding the real costs of everything that it produces, and making profit for shareholders who are remote from that experience. So yeah, I'm railing against that, I suppose.
And how much do the ideas in the book impact on Nixon McInnes? How much is this a textbook of the way that you do things, or is it more the way that you like it?
I'd say it was like, yeah, I don't know. It's complicated. I mean, the book is not about Nixon McInnes. I feel good saying that as a British person. It's not about me, it's about them. Because, you know, that we are one messed up little company, aren't we? There's a few of them over there. They're all the deranged looking ones, but damaged. But you know, the book isn't about Nixon McInnes. It's about but what am I on about? I don't know. All of me and the company is in there, but it's not about us. This is what we believe rather than, and this is what we aim for, and this is what we aspire for, and these are some of the experiments and journeys we've gone through. But
I mean, it might be worth you kind of giving people an idea of some of the things that you do at Nixon McInnes, which tie in with the ideas in Culture Shock.
okay. So I can only do that with the caveat that we are, like I've said, on our journey, developing all the time. We have open book accounting, which is one of the things that Ricardo Semler did at Maverick. Everyone in the company knows what everyone else earns. Everyone knows what the company is earning. Everyone knows what the forecast is every Monday morning, for better or for worse. So that's all open. We have a rewards team, so a decentralised group who handle the Max is on the rewards team, isn't it, Max? It's a very difficult time of year for the rewards team, so we basically realised that when your annual review fell in the year, meant that it would affect whether you get a better or worse annual review, because the company knows more and more by the end of the financial year exactly how it's doing. And so the box starts to close around, you know, like, everything is a lot more known. And people who are earlier in the financial year, it's like, yay, you know, it's a bit more freewheeling, yeah, we're doing all right, you know, who knows. So if you were earlier in the year, just by chance, you were going to get a better pay review than if you were later in the year. So we created a decentralised team, so 2 board directors, 2 non-board directors, whose job it is to make sure that everyone's rewards are equitable. So not equal, but fairly set in comparison to one another. Because you imagine, you know, if I ask most people who've worked in a normal company, you know, there's all sorts of skeletons in the cupboards around who earns what, and occasionally someone might get drunk on a Friday and it'll come out and then a fight will ensue. So we do that. We've experimented with, we go on like away weekends like most of the teams, and we were in the Welsh mountains, and one little group came up with this idea. They wanted to prototype something that would make it easier to fail, because, you know, if you read the literature, it all says if you can make failure more okay, you will be more creative, you will innovate more, and better things will happen. Because a lot of the time we're just in our comfort zone because we're terrified about failing. And so they came up with this idea about, okay, well, how can we make it easier to fail? And then Matt in our team, who's away travelling at the moment, does improv. And one of the improv exercises, they get you to go, when you're early in your improv career, they get you on stage, and then everyone looks at you and claps. And it's just a horrendous experience, apparently, because they're all looking at you. But what it teaches
like
you is...
they are now.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. But so they came up with this idea called Church of Fail, where basically once every 6 weeks the boardroom gets turned into a non-denominational church, and you stand at the front and you describe something you did that went really badly, and then everyone whoops and cheers. And if it sounds weird, like multiply that by 3.5 and insert LSD, and you're getting close to how weird it is. But you leave with this kind of, I don't know, euphoria. I don't know whether we've tried failing any better since we started doing it. But I do know that personally, for me, it helped me realise that I wasn't trying hard enough to fail. I'm doing a lot better now. What was the question?
Stuff that you do at Nixon McInnes that ties in with the...
Well, we measure. The other one is, the other little gimmick is we measure happiness, because we believe that you know, if you measure profit only, then you're just taking into account one dynamic that's important in business. For us, we're a people business. You know, the product walks in and out every day, and we thought it would be interesting to understand the relationship between happiness and profit. So we use 3 buckets by the door on the way out, and there's tennis balls in one. You pick up a ball at the end of the day and you put it in either the happy or the unhappy bucket. And so that gives us a real-time metric around you know, how happy are the team. If happiness is really bad one month, then that gives us a topic, and that's the first thing we talk about at the board meeting. I look at it every day, you know, it's like a kick in the stomach if it's bad, and a little hooray if it's good. So that's good. We'd quite like HSBC to have that next to their share price when you go into their marble towers in Canary Wharf. How cool would it be if the PLC had a happiness score right next to the share price? That would be cool.
And what about decision-making process at Nixon McInnes? Is that impacted at all?
We try and do. It's a bit complicated because ideally, like Ricardo Semler's nuts. I mean, you know, the company just sounds like I don't know, it's insane. It sounds brilliant, but Nixon McInnes still has to iron out some wrinkles around that. So we have a board and we have an MD. So we do have some centralised power, and then we believe in the power of democracy and empowerment. And so people are encouraged to take responsibility and to make decisions. But sometimes the interplay between the two is clumsy. So yes, but there's more work to do.
And what do you think the role then of leadership is in a 21st century democratic business?
Well, one of the weird things about writing the book is like the minute it's finished, you come out of this bubble, and then in about 5 companies that should have been in the book, you come across. And I don't know how many of you've heard of Valve Software, but someone said to me today they're the most profitable company in the world. You know, he's got crazy hair, so he might just say things like that. But they make video games. They make really, really, really successful video games, and it sounds like anarchy. Basically, anyone can do anything. The boss, the CEO, who's a big owner of the company, can't get his own games made by his video games company because they follow the projects and the people that they are inspired to follow, and they produce the things that are inspired. So yeah, they're a good example of that. Valve.
So that's leadership as anarchy, basically.
Well, it's leadership. I mean, I think one of the examples I talk about in the book is Gore. So you know Gore-Tex fabric in lots of rain jackets. W.L. Gore, the company is called, and it was started by Bill Gore and his wife in the 1950s. And he realised one day as he walked around that people had stopped talking to one another, and he realised that as they'd grown, they'd lost those personal relationships. And so he decided that from that day forth, every time they got to 150 people, they would create a new building, even though like economically that was stupid. And it turns out years later, you know, Dunbar's number, the Oxford anthropologist, finds that looking at primate brain sizes, the ultimate number of relationships that we as humans can sustain is about 150. So Gore kind of stumbled on that magic number. But one of the other things about Gore, as well as that, is that leadership in Gore is defined by followership. And so what that means is you cannot be a leader unless people are willing to follow you. So the people appoint their leaders, you know, and that's amazing. And they're a very, very innovative, multi-billion-dollar global company. And I'd encourage you, and there are some links in the book, to find the CEO. She's the 3rd CEO in the company's history, Terry Kelly, and she talks about it. And you know, it's just amazing. And she'll admit the weaknesses as well as the pluses. But that's modern leadership for me. And I think when you get Gen Y in the workforce, you get the next generation who are going to ask the question why a lot more. Those kind of softer skills, I think, are what leadership is going to be about.
Were there any other business stories that inspired you in terms of the book?
In the book or to write the book?
Either.
There's loads of stuff that's inspired me. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of Mondragon, which is a cooperative in Spain, but it's in the Basque region of Spain, which typically isn't like a wealthy part of Spain, as I understand it. And Mondragon, as a holding company, owns 256 cooperatives, all of which are owned by the people that work in them. And it's a totally inspiring business. And at the moment, with the Spanish economy basically on its knees, Mondragon and the Basque region is doing extremely well because it has deeper roots, because the people who are working in the businesses own the businesses, because the maximum multiple of earnings that you can earn as a CEO in a Mondragon company is 9 times what the lowest person earns. So those are totally inspiring stories to me, and that's about money staying where it's generated, and it's about, you know, and they make world-class products. So if anyone's a bike enthusiast, like Orbea Bikes is one of their companies. Really, really, so that's an inspiring story, company.
And what do you think the relationship between technology and the kind of company you're talking about is? Because both Mondragon and Gore actually predated digital technology. But there's a chapter in the book that talks about the way that digital technology can underpin a lot of the values that you're talking about in business.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think like these dynamics and these characteristics that I've got in Culture Shock, they are like what the web wants. They're what the web wants from the world. Like the web wants, what does the web want? I don't know. The web, you know, it's flat, it's democratized, it changes rapidly, it's messy, it's decentralized, it's populated by humans and bots.
It's open to all.
It's open to all. So all of those characteristics, if you just sort of reduce them into a jus, and then yes, come on, let's go. And then apply them somehow to a pie. No, you know what I mean. So the web for me is not the thing, and technology is not the thing, and it was really important to me not to write a book about technology. And what frustrates me at the moment in our own little cottage industry, about which some people call social business and other people call sort of social media or other stuff, is that it's all about the technology, and that's just such bullshit. Like the technology is 5% of the challenge. 95% of the challenge is what happens when that middle manager starts getting real-time feedback about how crap the service they're offering the rest of the organisation is. You know, what does the CEO do when the feedback she gets in her annual review from the people below and all around her is so much worse than she was hoping for to buy that villa in Tuscany? And I think, you know, so that's what I'm trying to do with the book, and talk about, yes, it's a really important ingredient, but it's not the thing. The thing is about how do we organise ourselves to solve big problems.
And there's another, it seems to me, key concept in the book around change and the speed of change and the velocity of change.
Yeah.
Can you just explain how that fits into your ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, like, having run a web design company that became a social media marketing company, that became a kind of change, behaviour change, consultancy, social thing, I've seen, and we've seen, how organisations have to move faster and faster. And we've seen like an accelerating effect of the way the media environment works now and what that does to organisations. So for example, we work with a big train company, helping them innovate and adapt. And you're basically talking about an engineering company with lots of lifers who basically joined because they like trains, quite literally. And they have a strong engineering culture, and they've all got their favourite locomotive and that kind of thing. And you know, they will tell you that in the old days when there was a crash, they had about 24 hours to kind of go back to the world and tell them what happened and why. And then about sort of 10 years ago, they had kind of 2 hours. And now they've got 2 minutes before, you know, you tweet a photo of the cows that just got hit by the train, or you tweet a photo of the mudslide at Croydon that's screwing up everyone's early morning commute. So for us, just as observers and consultants working with our clients, we've seen these beleaguered organisations having to deal with, you know, you watch Amazon versus Waterstones, you watch Netflix versus Blockbuster, you watch, you know, what's happening in finance now and what will happen to the banks, and it's relentless. So kind of inherent in all of this is the ability to change.
But what do you do with people who can't, I guess, is the question,
Yeah, it's
isn't
a
it?
really scary question.
Yeah, because not everybody can change quickly. It's quite hard for people to do.
No, I mean it really seriously.
Yeah.
It's like a really scary question. Like, there's a guy, Paul something, and his thing is about digital workplaces, and we were having a coffee and chatting, and he was, you know, where we got to at the end of the conversation is what's going to happen to all the other people. I mean, I think it is a really scary thing. I mean, there's a really good book called Employees First, Customers Second by a CEO of an Indian software company who achieved cultural change and of the sort that I talk about in Culture Shock, and some of their stories are in there. And he described his 80,000 employees as being divided into 3 groups, which was basically the kind of the up for it, I can't remember the exact language, but people who wanted to change, fence sitters, and the resistors, let's call them. And he focused on the ones who wanted to and the fence sitters. And he didn't feel it was within his scope, or even he had the resources to try and move those that didn't want to change. And there was a quote that someone tweeted today, which was, I can't remember, something along the lines of, if you resist change, you're basically going to be irrelevant. And it's a stark thought for those of us, you know, with friends and...
It was an American general who
Yeah.
said it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be good.
Yeah.
I had a real-time access to the internet.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to them. Hopefully they'll start a business.
An anti-change business. Selling vinyl
Or a
records.
political movement.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, actually. How much... I mean, in your book, really, it's about how these things impact on business. But do you think what often we haven't seen, or we haven't seen as fundamentally as we could, is the way that they might impact on, you know, other spheres of life, education, political parties. Seem to me, you know.
I think both of those are really interesting. Yeah, massively. I mean, I wrote about in the book. I wrote about one of them. I wrote about. I think I might have written about Anonymous. But I didn't write about Occupy, which obviously came out of Anonymous. But from a political movement point of view, I don't know, how many, quick show, let's do a show of hands. Who's heard of the Pirate Party? Cool. I asked this question at an event the other day, that was most of the room, and hardly anyone had. The Pirate Party sounds like it sounds like the kind of thing that's just fun and might get 3% or 0.3% of the votes. The Pirate Party has 8% of the German thingy-bob, Bundesding, political machinery. So Europe's most stable and powerful economy is 8% run by the Pirate Party. The Pirate Party stands for internet freedom, is one of its kind of central pillars. But it's a really interesting, powerful political movement which has that jus, that reduction of the web in its DNA. There's a TED guy, Sugata Mitra. So his creative idea was to stick a computer in a wall. No instructions, no tutorial, nothing. And basically the children of the village taught themselves how to use the computer. And they learned English, but a kind of weird Windows English. and then they taught the teenagers, and then the teenagers taught the elders. And I met him at an event in Newcastle, and I was kind of there feeling smug about, you know, living in Western Europe and asking about this interesting project. And he said, I'm working here in Newcastle, I'm working in Boston now, we're doing these projects here. And his vision is to be able to fly over a patch of land and drop the technology that's required to help people elevate themselves, educate themselves. And I think education is incredibly interesting too.